Sometimes life surprises you in the most unexpected ways. For my guest today, that surprise came in the form of a DNA test that ended up reconnecting her with her birth family years after being adopted. Hello and welcome to Not Made in China, the podcast where we talk all things adoption and the beautiful madness that comes with it. I'm your host, Shaosheen, and today I'm joined by the lovely Hannah Thomas, fellow Chinese adoptee and good friend of mine. So let's jump into it, and I hope you enjoy eavesdropping on our conversation. Hannah, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to Not Made in China.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's so mad getting back in touch after so many years, but I saw the podcast. It just looked like such a cool idea. So I had to get in touch when I saw that. It was really cool.
Oh, thank you. No, honestly, I'm so happy to have you on, and it's been really lovely reconnecting with people who I've not seen for years.
For sure. Please excuse, I don't think I have too much of a Welsh accent, but...
We love an accent. So to start with, I'd love it if you could share a bit about your adoption story.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember now. I was adopted from a city called Lishui in the Hangzhou province, I think it was. I'm not great with my Chinese geography, but I was adopted when I was about 15, 16 months, I think. My mum and dad are both from Wales, so raised thoroughly Welsh, you know, I feel very patriotic to that. Yeah, same as you, I think, based on your other podcast episodes. Like, I've always known I was adopted. It's never been any sort of like big reveal or secret. It's quite difficult to not know when you're obviously Chinese and your parents are very, very white. So, but yeah, I've always known, always been totally fine with it, very chill. If anything, it's like, you know, like a new job or when you've got new friends, it's like, oh, what's a fun fact about you? Like that always comes up because it's always so interesting and people always have questions.
That's so good though, because whenever we have to do, you know, when you do icebreakers at work and it's like 2 truths and a lie, I never think to say I'm adopted. It just never even occurs to me as an interesting fact about myself. So I'm going to start using it now. You've inspired me.
You should do it. To be fair, I don't know whether it's a green flag or a red flag, but I do sometimes put it on my Hinge bio as 2 truths and a lie and just see what people come up with.
I like that. It's interesting. It shakes it up a little bit. I don't know about you, but did you grow up around many other Chinese people sort of day to day outside the adopted community?
Not really. I think in primary school, there were maybe like 2 other Chinese kids in like a couple of years below me. And going through secondary school, there was there was one other boy in my year who was Chinese, but obviously his parents were also Chinese, you know. And it was the very cliche thing of like, oh, you should get together because you're both Chinese. It's like,
oh my God.
That's not how this works, you know. But it was funny, and we did get on. But like, it was so funny, even though we were both Chinese, we didn't have much in common because obviously growing up and cultures were so different. Because I was raised, like I said, very, very Welsh. So,
and like, how did you find kind of not being around like many Chinese people in school? Did you notice it much, or were you just a bit like, it is what it is?
It honestly didn't really bother me. I don't know whether I was just oblivious to it, but obviously growing up with pretty much like 90% like white friends, white family, all that sort of stuff, I kind of, does it sound like weird to say I forgot I was Chinese?
Not at all.
And like sometimes I'd be like, oh wait, hang on, yes I am. So it didn't bother me in a negative way at all. As an adult, I'm probably a bit more aware of it now, especially, you know, like in the workplace and when you go to uni and there's lots of other diverse cultures and people may assume you're part of the more, it's not the right word, but authentic Chinese community and that sort of stuff. But I'm like, no, I'm just me hanging out, you know. One thing that was quite interesting is obviously a lot of kids, especially like, you know, when you go into a new school, like when you're going up to secondary or even university, a lot of people might assume you speak Chinese just based on how you look. And it's always like, I don't know if you were ever interested in it, but I did a couple of Chinese like language lessons when I was a kid. And that was kind of fun. It was interesting. And I think I can still remember how to write the numbers 1 to 10 at most.
When people speak to you in Chinese now, like, this might be a weird question, but like, how do you feel?
It's fine, but it just makes me giggle more than anything else. Because like I said, I forget that people may just assume I speak it. So I'm always like, me? Like there was one time I went into, literally it was when I was an undergrad, I went into like a Tesco's Express or something quite late at night. And the security, I think he was trying to be sweet, but you never know how to take these things, do you? I was literally just walking, it was late at night, and he literally went, ni hao, and I was like, you know, in my head, I was like, I think you're being like trying to be friendly, but also I don't actually speak the language, but thanks.
It's such a weird one because like I don't know about you, but I've had people sort of shout like "ni hao" on the street, and then I'm like,
Mm.
you're a prick. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then also, but then some people do it. I want to
Like
say
to
genuinely.
genuinely, yeah, it's really strange because I'm also like, what do you say? Only speak English, sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, it's hard. Like it's hard to know. Well, it's not hard to know who's genuine and who's not.
But it's hard to know how to react, I think.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly it. Because what do? You're just like, "Ni hao to you too, partner."
Exactly. You should just start speaking like French or something. I'll answer in Welsh. Just
Just really throw a spanner in the works.
exactly, exactly.
But it is interesting, yeah, when you start thinking of little things. Like, I don't know if you have people sort of, I know you said you had that guy in Tesco, but if there are any other times when, I know people have said something and you were a bit like, oh, whatever, but then other people have called it out.
This is a kind. I mean, it's not funny, but kids will be kids, like you say. But I remember this story really vividly from when I was in primary school, and I was literally, I don't know, like yay high, like very small, and there was this guy in my class, and he was a bit of like a troublemaker. I don't think he was nasty, but you know, one of the like naughty boys. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We were in the playground, like we weren't necessarily playing together, and he said something to me, and I can't remember what it was, and he made like I can only describe them as like Asian noises with like hands like that. You know what I mean?
Oh no.
But it's really funny because I even as a small child, I didn't really it didn't upset me like I didn't take it like super personally or whatever, but I basically I didn't really like this kid anyway. So I did know it was wrong, so I told the teacher, and when I tell you, the headmaster gave him an absolute bollocking, because obviously that is flat out racism,
Yeah.
especially for young kids, and
Yeah,
you do have to like tell them that's not right.
for sure.
But if anything, it just shocked me that the extent of the teacher, like an adult's reaction to it. So I was like, I guess that was probably the first instance of like racism that I can remember as a kid. And if anything, I was just taken aback by like, oh, this is quite a serious matter and it's really not okay. Whereas I was just like, he was teasing me, like, you know what I mean?
It's so interesting, and it's so good that teacher did step up
Oh, for sure.
what he needed to do. 'Cause it's so easy to brush it off as, oh, like kids will be kids, but no, it's like, yeah, they will, but you need to teach them what's right and what's wrong. And I'm so glad that they were able to step in, but also like sorry that kid did that because that's not a nice thing.
But like even now as an adult, I'm like, if I saw that behavior, you would obviously reprimand it. But it genuinely didn't really bother me. But then I'm like, did it deep down, and I just don't know about it.
It is such an interesting one. When I think I must have been in reception, and one of my friends came round for dinner, and we were sat at dinner with my mum, and then my friend was like, it was some kind of joke, and she was like, my dad's Chinese, and like pulled her eyes up, and then was like, my mum's Japanese, and pulled her eyes down, and then was like, and that's how I ended up like this, and did that wonky eye thing, and then I was there like laughing because obviously I didn't get it, and then my mum was just sat there like. And then when the friend went when the friend went home, because I think there is that weird thing of like you can't really tell another person's child off. But afterwards, she kind of sat me down and was like, right, that wasn't okay. Like, here's why. And that was probably the first time I've ever had to consider it because it didn't bother me. I just didn't, and maybe it's because I didn't associate myself with like the stereotypes they were describing. Another thing I'd love to talk about, of course, is, well, birth parents. And I know you have a really interesting story around this, but when you were younger, did you talk much about your birth parents? Did you know much about them? Like, I'd love to know a bit more.
So, for the sake of the listener, because you already know spoilers, I knew literally nothing about my birth parents at all. I knew my adoption story in the sense of like, oh, you were adopted from like the Children's Welfare Institute in Lishui, this date. Obviously, mum and dad would be like, we flew out to get you here. And it was really nice, like, through photo albums. You know, when you're a kid, it's a bit boring, but as an adult now, it's really nice to look back at all those memories. It's really, really sweet looking back now. And I'm glad they took all those photos and like that sort of stuff. But as far as details go, didn't know anything. And I think similar to you, it's fair to just assume as girls that it was most likely just the one child policy. And growing up, if anyone asks, like, I know kids are kids, so they don't know, but it's like, oh, why were you adopted? It's like, well, I don't know. But the assumption would be, oh, probably because of the one child policy. So, you know, in China, you could only have one child. And culturally, like financially, even just for work, like it was preferential to have a boy so that, correct me if I'm wrong, so that they could like go away and work and send money and that sort of stuff. Maybe that sort of thing.
To be honest, No, woefully little. But I think my parents always said to me, sometimes it was because maybe traditionally the woman would go and get married and then she would look after her in-laws as opposed to the son who would stay and look after the parents when they got older. But anyone correct me if I'm wrong.
They are. We're both learning today. It's great.
We are learning today.
So that was always my assumption, and I have, you have like a curious thought in the same sense of, oh, what would my life be? Or it's like, oh, what are my birth parents doing? Or like that sort of thing. But I can genuinely, hand on heart, say I had never had any like drive to do anything about it. Do you know what I mean? To search or anything. And I know that's not to say there's anything wrong with that, because I know from like community pages and stuff like that, a lot of people who are adopted from China, particularly, I think stereotypically, that there's a lot more of them in America. I know a lot of them are quite keen on hiring private investigators and like going back to their orphanages and trying to search that way, which I like salute. That sounds like such an effort and a journey that I don't think emotionally I could take that. Do you know what I mean? Like too invested.
I know recently you had a really interesting development, and feel free to tell us about that.
So it was I think it was not long before COVID. I talked to a couple of my friends about it, and I ended up doing a 23andMe test. I've got a funny feeling the company's actually not gone bust, but like they might have rebranded or something now. But at the time, like it was quite popular, and I liked that it was super simple. It was literally just like spit in a tube, send it off, job done. And the main reason I wanted to do it was, I'm guessing the same as you. You know, if like you go to the doctors for literally anything, they're always like, "Oh, have you got any family history of X, Y, and Z?" And it's like, you tell me, I don't know. So it was always a bit of, again, maybe as a scientist, I was a bit more like, from a medical point of view, like curious as to whether there was anything sort of morbid lurking. You know what I mean? So I was reading into this 23andMe test, and one of the main selling points is that they test for a lot of recessive genetic mutations. So things like COPD, like anything lung related, asthma, like, you can get the BRCA gene mutations for breast cancer, that sort of stuff. And that's not necessarily to say if you did this test that I would have any of these conditions, but it's another interesting thing that if you were going to have kids, whether you'd pass anything on. Do you know what I mean? So that was my main drive. I was just like, oh, okay, knowledge is power, give it a go. And I think it wasn't too expensive. It was maybe like 50, 60 quid. So I was like, I'll give it a go. And again, not to make like light of different ethnicities, but those types of tests obviously tell you your ethnicity, heritage, and obviously a lot of like YouTubers and things back in the day, like if they'd be doing these tests, they'd be like, oh, I'm like 10% Scottish or like 3% Norwegian, you know what I mean? And I remember posting it on my Instagram when I got the result back, because I was like, who'd have guessed it, guys? 100% Chinese. Fuming.
60 quid down the drain.
Literally, what was the point? Anyway, spoilers, like gene-wise and like genetics, that was all fine. And it was really cool. They told you different things, like if you get, obviously you'd know, but if you get like alcohol flush reaction, which I definitely do. Also, that funny taste thing where like, I'm trying to think what the herb is. There's a
Coriander.
That's the one, like if it tastes like soap and stuff like that. So these are all quite cool things to read about. And then I think it was either when you sent off the test or when you got your results back, you basically had the option to, do you want to upload your data to our databases? And obviously there are like different things you can check yes or no for, this, that, the other. And I was like, well, hey, look, I'm not using the data for anything and I've got nothing to hide. So sure. So I just ticked all the boxes, mostly just like,
get your money's worth.
Exactly. I was like, why not? Treat yourself. And within, I don't think it was very long, it basically obviously compares your genetic makeup to everyone else who's also done these tests on this big database of theirs, and it'll flag up any relations. And obviously you hear all these dramas of like, oh, I found like stepsisters, like, that, and like, did my parents have an affair? All these sort of like juicy stories you hear from these genetic tests sort of things. Nothing that crazy, don't worry. But well, yes, crazy, but not like that. So the top match that came up once all these comparisons and things were done, it said second cousin. And I think, the name was like Gianni Chen. I was like, okay, wild, because that kind of sounds Asian, but also definitely sounds Italian, suspicious. But it's hard, it's regardless of how much you want to say, oh, that seems legit or not, like this, it's genetics, do you know what I mean? It doesn't lie. Like, I can't argue that they've genetically, scientifically matched us as somehow very vaguely related. So when I was looking it up, second cousin means you share great great grandparents. So that's obviously quite a way back if you think about it on the tree. I was like, oh, it's all getting very complicated. But you can like connect profiles. So I clicked connect and we got chatting, and classic like website chat systems. It was terrible. So I think we moved to either Instagram or WhatsApp or something. And super long story short, he seems really cool. I think he's a little bit younger than me, maybe. So I'm 28. Oh, so old. So I think he's a little bit younger, but he was studying in university in America somewhere. And so this is my second cousin now. Gianni's parents had emigrated from China to Italy in the 80s, which apparently that was a semi-common thing to do. I was like, okay, cool.
Interesting.
I know, hence he's got the name Gianni, which is very not authentically Chinese. But obviously, because he was studying in the US and he'd grown up in Italy, like his English was perfect. So there was no communication issues there whatsoever. And we got chatting and like just about what he's studying, what I was doing, all that sort of stuff, which was just cool. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, cool. End of story. I've got a second cousin. That's cool. Do you know what I mean? Like nothing more was going to come of that. And I was like, I know it's a distant relative and I'll probably never meet him because he's literally in America, but it's still like a small part of a reconnection, if you will. So we were chatting, and obviously I told him that I was adopted and stuff. And we got chatting, and I asked my mum and dad. I was very open about this at the time, like with my parents, or as some people may say, my adopted parents, you know. And they were like, "Oh yeah, like I think your documents in this filing cabinet somewhere." So I found them and took some pictures and sent them to him. And unbeknownst to me, which wasn't a problem at all, he basically sent these Chinese and English, both translated documents, to his dad in Italy, and the ins and outs of it escaped me. I wasn't 100% sure what happened, but basically, this second cousin's dad ended up through like family connections, asking around, this, that, the other, ended up getting into contact with what I now know to be, or I'm now fairly certain, is my elder sister, which was wild. I didn't know this at the time. So basically, his dad was doing all this detective work in the background. And basically, Gianni got back in touch with me maybe like a month later and was like, literally just on WhatsApp, like, oh, I think we found your parents. I was like,
oh my God.
Sorry, what? I was like, I wasn't aware we were doing this, but okay, cool. So he sends me this picture of these obviously two older Chinese people, like husband and wife, and a girl who was a little bit older than me. And I was like, I know it sounds funny, but obviously we don't look like our parents, like our adopted parents physically. But from my point of view, even looking at this picture of these Chinese people, I was like, well, I can't see any like striking resemblance as such. Like, oh, okay, maybe like a similar face shape, but nothing overwhelming. And then later on with that, there came another picture of another one of their daughters, and I think I sent you a picture, didn't I? And
Yeah.
it was wild. It was kind of like looking in a mirror, but also really weird because I was like, I know that's not me, but that was the resemblance was uncanny, and I was like, I feel unwell. This is odd. Anyway, to cut a really, really long story short, second cousin's dad gave me the contact details for these people, and I got in touch with them. And basically, I haven't done any genetic testing because, quite frankly, I don't know how you would even go about comparing samples from like someone in China versus someone here. And like, that seems like the kind of thing it would be easier to do it in person, but I'm not flying halfway across the world just for that. You know what I mean? I'm not
Cost of
that
living
bothered.
crisis.
Exactly. Not in this economy. But if nothing else, I know there is a genetic link because obviously it was the second cousin and it was through him. And obviously I trust that everyone in that chain of conversation is related. Do you know what I mean? And the resemblance, I can't explain that away. That's
That
mad.
was uncanny. When you sent that to me, it was almost like looking at probably at the last photo we had together, actually.
Yeah, it's so strange. So strange. So amongst all of that, I basically ended up with, obviously in China, they don't do like WhatsApp and Facebooks. They use WeChat, which I didn't
Mm.
really know about until this. And so you learn more every day. So I was in contact then with what I now know to be my elder sister and younger sister.
Wow.
And there's also a younger brother as well. Um, so what I believe to be my biological parents, they don't speak English, which is totally fair. I suppose there's no reason for them to. Um, Eldest sister doesn't really much, but on WeChat you can like auto translate, so conversation is possible, which I am very grateful for technology for that. But yeah, from what I've managed to glean like through translating messages and stuff is basically my biological parents had their first child and it was a girl. And it was like, okay, I'm paraphrasing, but essentially, okay, this is not ideal, but we can deal with this. I think I could be wrong. Anyone feel free to correct me also. But I think in the rural parts of China, if you had a girl, you could essentially have one more child without there being any repercussions because you were more rural, like not in the city. Okay, fine. So they had another child. I believe that was me. Also a girl.
Gosh.
That's not ideal. Okay. And again, I'm paraphrasing, so there definitely could be some holes in this story. But basically, I then got given to a relative to be cared for because they were like, "Oh, we want to try for a boy. This is not a boy. We'll put her over there somewhere. Still within reach, but put her over there somewhere." Tried again, third child, also a girl. Oh no, similar situation. Goes with another family member, which I do question why they had all these family members
I was
without
going to say, they've
kids.
got a lot of family members knocking
I
about.
know, I know. Bizarre. Anyway, so then fourth kid was a boy, which is, I guess, it's still strange to say, but I guess my younger brother, which is wild. So essentially, as the years have gone on, they ended up obviously raising the first eldest daughter, the youngest fourth child, which was a boy. So my brother, and then the two girls in the middle. So me and my sister, still so strange, ended up being raised elsewhere, obviously. And in a really roundabout way, I don't know what happened, but I ended up obviously at an orphanage and getting adopted. But it's wild because from what I can gather, my biological parents didn't even know that I was adopted and that I wasn't in China. They were under the
Oh
impression
my
that I was
God.
still like somewhere else in the country, like being raised by family, which is wild, absolutely wild. And then my other sister, who's wasn't raised by my biological parents, she I think was raised near to home, but ended up obviously now is married and she lives in I think it's Serbia, somewhere in Eastern Europe, with her also Chinese husband, and she's got a child, if not multiple, but they live with her in-laws out there, and it's just a it's you couldn't even write it. Honestly, it's mad. So my younger brother works in so Lishui is obviously like a sort of more ruralish village. So he works in Hangzhou in the city, and I don't know if it's a stereotypical like, oh, he sends money back to the family. I don't know if that's true or not, but he works away in the city anyway. And my eldest sister has got a husband and she's got three kids, which is wild. So they're all girls. I mean, obviously that's
Yeah,
allowed these
it's a
days,
thing.
but yeah. One thing that from the whole experience, one thing that was really sweet is my parents were super chill about it. If anything, they were more excited and more interested than I was. So my mum uh, kept pestering me like, "Oh, ask their address." And I know obviously
Oh,
dresses in China are slightly different to here,
yeah.
but she ended up sending my elder sister some like little cute matching outfits for like the kids and stuff. And I was
Oh,
just like, "You're too much, mother. You're too much." But it was really sweet.
that's really sweet. And it's such an incredible story. And how did you feel initially when you found them?
Just disbelief, because as you know, growing up adopted, you just think, oh well, there's no chance, needle in a haystack. Not,
Mm-hmm.
at least my opinion was always not even going to bother. What's the point? I'm not that bothered about it. I'm not missing out on anything. It'll just be a mystery. So it was wild to just stumble across it accidentally. Do you know what I mean? Like with no intention whatsoever. Maybe ticking that box for like the comparison DNA thing was like a bit of curiosity, but that wasn't. I can tell you for a fact that wasn't my intention of doing the test in the first place. So it's just wild how it all panned out.
I know, and like you said, so many people hire PIs and they spend so
Mm,
much money and time in trying to find their birth parents, and then you spit in a tube. And
wild. It just happened completely unplanned. I mean, my initial reaction was obviously, I'm not to be dramatic, not like my heart stopped, but like when those pictures came through, I was just like, this is weird. I didn't know how to react. Do you know what I mean?
it's so fair.
And I obviously I told mum and dad and this and that and the other, but I think other than mum and dad and like my close best friends, the first person I told then in person was one of my colleagues in work, and the immediate first thing I said, I've had some big news. I think it was over a weekend or something. I was like, you'll never guess what. And classic being dramatic, like, you're pregnant. I was like, oh, no,
I knew you were
hell
going to
no,
say.
hell no. Absolutely. That would be a miracle conception, I'll tell you. But
Yeah.
no. And he genuinely went, you found a sibling. I was like, how did you know? I know, genuine second guess. And I sort of went, yeah,
Wow.
And he didn't believe me when I said yeah. And I went into like the very brief description, and bless him, his first reaction was, I hope you're going to get counselling for all this, which I totally understand because it is
Yeah,
like a lot to unpack. And I guess if anyone, for a lot of people, and maybe I should, but it's one of those things that if you're more emotionally invested, that can obviously really disrupt someone. Has the potential to really disrupt someone's life. Do you know what I
of
mean?
course.
But I was just like, maybe I'm just too chill. It's just like, okay, cool. I'm not gonna fly out immediately and come embrace you all, and like, I'm just like, cool. I mean, again, you're right. I can only speak for myself, but I don't feel like I was necessarily missing anything. So it's not like a missing puzzle piece or filling a gap. It's just like, oh, okay, this is just an added bonus to what was
Yeah.
already a very full family dynamic in life and that sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's so fair. And I understand why other people do want to go and find their birth parents because they might feel there is a part of them missing or there is a gap there or there's some closure there they'd like to get. And that's so understandable. But I think I mean, it hasn't happened. So who knows how I'd
Yeah,
react. But I feel like I
true.
probably would be similar to you.
And another thing that is wild is like to think that I, I never even considered that they didn't know I'd been adopted.
That's a really
Do you know
interesting
what I mean?
point.
Because obviously the assumption is, well, they've given you up for adoption because for whatever reason they couldn't look after you. But that was just wild.
And it's interesting as well that it was a family member who looked after you. So I'm guessing they didn't speak much to that family member, or I don't know what story was told if they ever did reach out.
Again, like maybe lost in translation, but it was something
Hmm.
like the family member like moved away like to a different part of China, and they just
Okay.
assumed that they'd taken me with them, and they were like not hiding me, but like didn't want me to have contact with them, sort of thing, so that they were
Okay.
that sort of situation, I think. But yeah, it's wild, honestly.
It's so wild. And I wonder how they must have felt finding out that you exist and you're in England or Wales, sorry.
Whoa, hang on a
Um,
minute, take that back. Wow, I will not have any of that English reputation tarred on
keep,
me. Thank you very much.
keep that away from you.
It's like, as I said earlier, I'm not racist, but I'm definitely not
Yeah.
English. Mm-mm,
I love
mm-mm.
that. Don't
Very
even blame
different
me, especially these
countries.
days.
Very different countries, thank you. But yeah, it's a wild story, and honestly, anyone I tell, it just adds more. From my perspective, it's just like, oh, do you want some more fun facts? Like,
I was going to say, you must be great for icebreakers at work. You have
so
a whole
true, so
roster.
true. Whenever someone relatively new that I know gets told that story, they're literally there just like shell shocked, like what?
I was going to ask, what have the reactions been from other people? Because I can imagine other people's reactions might have been more dramatic than your own.
They're mostly disbelief, and a
Yeah.
lot of people are like, oh, that's so lush, like, you know, like really good things, which they are. But I'm also like, from an outsider's perspective, again, it is probably the whole like, oh, like this missing piece is finally filled, like you know, which is very sweet, and that's not for them to know or not know, but yeah, I mean, it's overall positive.
Good. I'm glad. And do you actually speak much to your birth parents, or is it more just communication with the cousin? How is it at the moment?
The parents, no, not at all, because like I said, they don't speak English, so it's like there would be no way to. I don't even know. No, I mean they must be able to text, but I don't. I'm not sure what the sort of language communication level is
Sure.
there. The cousin, I don't really. I follow him on Instagram, the second cousin, so you know, kind of classic. Keep in touch, see what's going on in their life. Mostly, I speak to the elder sister, who obviously lives nearby to my biological parents. Probably every like I don't know, probably check in like once a month at the minute, something like that. But obviously, when this all started, it was like constant like questions, answers, like this, that,
Yeah.
the other. One thing that's really interesting, and I don't know about your story, but with birthdays, I'm fairly certain the orphanage that I was from, it was always my understanding that they basically gave an educated guess to my birthday,
Yeah. Same.
which was 10th November. And then when I was put in touch with this girl that was obviously turned out to be my elder sibling, she was saying about when my birth parents' second daughter was born. And, you know, I didn't even realize this because I know so little about it, but obviously trying to have like a slightly different calendar system, like the lunar calendar,
Yeah.
something. But basically, it turned out when it was translated that I think the orphanage were only like a couple of days out or something like that. So it was really, like, really, really close. So I was like, oh, but then that was probably of all the things. I was like, oh, so like my birthday's not technically my birthday, but you know, very strange. It makes me laugh. Even like growing up in school, people are like, so your birthday might not be your actual birthday, and they're like, so you might be like 37. It's like, well, no,
No,
obviously,
obviously.
because I'm still a
No.
teenager. I'm definitely, they weren't that far
No.
off. It
That would have
wasn't
been
like
impressive.
they weren't mistaking like a 10-year-old child for like a 2-month-old baby.
That's really funny.
It's not that far off. Like it's got to be somewhere close.
Like, it didn't like, turn up at the orphanage looking like Benjamin Button. Like, let's just give it
Exactly,
some credit.
exactly. They must have been kind of close. They're not like, oh, she could be 10 days, she could be 10 years, not sure. We'll go somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. It's definitely a 50-50.
Strange. It's just another thing to consider that was like slightly different growing up.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny now, even talking about it, because I don't really think about it very often. But then there are sort of little things that do stand out as, oh, like, that was a bit different. Did children at school kind of speak to you about being adopted?
I don't think I ever had any negative experiences to it at all. But then maybe similar to you, I'm just a very open person. So like if anyone had any questions, I'd do my best to answer. And that's that. Like there were no secrets around it. And it wasn't like, I mean, thankfully it was never a hush hush type situation. Because like I feel like if you're internationally adopting, it's not really something you can hide. Do you know what I mean? At least not once you get to a certain age, at least. So yeah, one thing that did always make me chuckle. Again, I'm only remembering a lot of these things now because you don't think about it much. But a lot. I used to go to a choir when I was little, for like a good like maybe 7 or 8 years. And a lot of the other girls, when your parents pick you up afterwards, they used to think my parents were my grandparents because they were slightly older, having me as well. So like it definitely could have been feasible, but obviously for kids, it's a fair assumption to make. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of. Well, they can't be her parents because they're not Chinese, but they could be her grandpa. You know what I mean? I think my mum used to like jokingly like, I don't look that old. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it would be kind of funny. But yeah, that was another interesting one. But no one ever never had any negative experiences about it. Like I said, mum and dad used to like kind of celebrate my adoption day. So sometimes like I'd have friends around or stuff. So that was kind of cool.
Oh.
Yeah, nothing bad. What about you?
Again, yeah, like really boring. I don't think I really had anyone be rude.
So
Like,
boring. Like
just so boring.
I just needed a bit more trauma, please. It was so
I was
boring.
going to say a bit more interest. Let's just spice it up. No, I think I was lucky because, well, I definitely had kids say to me, "Oh, like, where are your real parents? Who are your real parents?"
Yeah,
Which you kind of expect, but yeah, but I would get comments like, "Oh, where are your real parents?" And because there wasn't really that, I think especially when we were growing up, and even nowadays, there isn't really that education piece outside of the adoption community about
true,
adoption and
so
how
true.
to like and how to handle that. So I had a few comments like that, and then I had someone say to me, "Oh, like your parents didn't want you," and
Classic, classic.
like the classic line. But it just didn't bother me because I was a really happy kid and I love my parents. I had a great life, and I was just like, yeah, whatever.
I think in a kind of in a way we were fortunate. Correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but we were fortunate that we could you could kind of explain it like there were reasons we could have been adopted that wasn't just like oh they didn't want you. It'd be like well there's this one child policy or like maybe they were underprivileged or do you know what I mean, that sort of thing. And also I think like for example if a kid asked me like, oh where are your parents, I was like I don't know, back in China somewhere, I don't
Oh, you tell me,
know.
mate. You tell me.
Whereas I do feel maybe those questions would be harder for someone who is adopted from the UK. Do you know what I mean? And maybe like again in a close proximity to their family, or maybe I mean I am also wholly undereducated on things like adoption systems nowadays. All I really know is my own experience, which is why this podcast is so interesting. Learning lessons every day.
Thanks.
But like yeah, I feel like maybe those questions would bother a kid more if they were more local or more like in touch with their situation of adoption. I think
Yeah.
I at least I feel like I was quite fortunate that I was so far removed from anything. It wasn't I could basically live my entire life, ironically now I know, but my entire life never worrying if I'd come across a family member in the street or like someone was going to get in contact with me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is ironic because I did find my birth parents, but that's not the point. But there's no worry of, at least I don't think if you adopt internationally, there's far less worry of any interference. That's maybe not the right word, but disruption then compared to if you knew you were born, like, I don't know, down the road or something, you know?
It's so true. And I generally had never considered that. But it is such a
Mm.
good point because I think, yeah, like you said, we do have that physical distance. And in my case, anyway, I didn't know, well, I guess in both of our cases, we didn't know much about our birth parents. And
Mm.
both of our parents did speak very openly about adoption. So there was nothing to boo. So firstly, if people came to us with comments, we had so many answers to give because we knew it didn't bother us, and we were like, well, actually, no, you're wrong, because it could have been the one child policy, or there are no secrets. So then there's no kind of like tension around it, and we're not going to get defensive because we just know there's nothing to get defensive about. And then secondly, we do have that distance, and it's almost like ignorance is bliss to a degree.
True.
And then you almost like find your own sort of closure within it, I suppose, because
you just accept, like, okay,
you just accept it.
Well, ironically, you'd think, I'm never going to learn anything. That's it, cool. But
yeah. I think it was beneficial for me anyway, having that distance. And probably I assume I'm never going to meet my birth parents. I'm not interested right now in seeking them out. And I could go my whole life never knowing who they are. That's fine. And I think maybe I can feel like that, and I can feel safe to feel like that because I know I'm not going to bump into them down the street. So
exactly, you're not on edge that like, oh, someone might get in contact with you or something, because it's so physically and also just culturally and just everything so far removed now. And also, I might be right or wrong, I don't know, but I feel like data keeping back then was also probably far less thorough than it is these days as well. I do think it's interesting though, because even between obviously talking to you about your story and like a couple of the other girls that I'm in touch with, and even the wider group of people that we kind of have in common, like people from CAP, is like, even though we're all adopted from China, which is a huge thing to have in common, everyone's story is so different, even then.
For sure. And it's interesting speaking to people who, like, some people don't agree with adoption but they've been adopted, and that's really interesting. And other people like love the fact they're adopted, and I mean, how do you feel about it?
Well, like I said, it is mostly just a fun fact, and it's like, I think a lot of, not outsiders, that's not the right word, but a lot of people looking in would be like, oh, you're so lucky, you're so like, don't get me wrong, I'm totally aware I am privileged to even like have an education, all that sort of stuff, compared to anyone, adoption or not, regardless, but it is the whole like, oh, like what your life could have been like, you're so lucky, so grateful. I'm like, I am, but I'm also like, I do work hard for what I have, I've gone through school like everyone else, and this and that. I've got a job, I earn money, I save, that sort of stuff. So I think they're kind of like two separate entities. I am lucky to have the opportunity, but also I work hard for the success that I do have. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you can feel fortunate for the life you've had, but it doesn't decredit anything that you've done and the work you put towards it, because you've earned everything that you have.
For sure. But aside from other people's opinions on the matter, like, I am genuinely grateful that like I do have the opportunity, especially knowing now a little bit about like my biological sibling situations. Like, obviously I think they did all go to school and stuff, but like definitely uni wasn't an option and stuff like that. So just, but not in like a weird like, oh, thank God I was adopted, like all that sort of wishy-washy fairy area stuff. But it's just to like, give a nod that I have been fortunate, and but that's all it gets out of my brain. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and then I think when people try and say, oh, you should feel grateful for being adopted, or you should feel lucky for being adopted, I think that's a very separate conversation. You can feel grateful for your life, but then you shouldn't feel you shouldn't feel you have to be grateful for something that you didn't choose. But then people just shouldn't tell other people how to feel, I think, just
true
in life.
People have very strong opinions on other people's lives, and I'm just like, cool, you do you, buddy.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, just relax. Like, it's not
that deep.
It's not that deep.
But I just think this is a really cool media. Like, I'm so behind the times. I've only recently started getting into podcasts, really. But it's just such an easy media to listen to. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to sit and watch anything. You don't have to actively read with your eyes. Like, I listen to podcasts when I'm in work and stuff. And it's just, obviously I'm biased that it's content that I'm interested in, but I just think it's really cool. It's something that a lot of people don't know much about. And so well done to you for setting it up.
Oh, thank you. No, I really appreciate it. And honestly, thank you so much for coming on. It's been just lovely to chat and also just catch up.
For sure. I'm mostly just apologetic for the amount of footage you're going to have to edit. But
not at all. This is great. Honestly, it's been so fun, and maybe we'll do it again sometime. Today's episode certainly gave us a lot to think about. It was really interesting to hear that while finding Hannah's birth parents was of course a huge discovery, it wasn't necessarily the dramatic, life-changing moment you might expect. It was incredibly meaningful, of course, but it didn't change the love she has for her parents or her life in Wales. We also reflected on experiences of childhood racism and the importance of recognising and responding to it, which again reminds us that the colourblind love is enough approach is not sufficient in transracial adoption. And, perhaps most importantly, we're reminded that no two adoption stories are the same. Everyone has such a different journey and such a different experience. Whether you're navigating your own adoption story, supporting someone else, thinking about identity and belonging, or simply just enjoying hearing other people's experiences, I hope today's conversation gave you some perspective and insight. I post new episodes every other Tuesday, finally, and you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Not Made in China Podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and I can't wait to see you next time.